Hey there, Moose Tubers. Lone Moose here. Ready to do episode number 2 of my series on smoking briskets and pulled pork. Just give you a real quick little introduction here, and then I will get into the program. If you remember in the first video, I was talking about how expensive the briskets were in this part of the country, which is unusual because Texas is beef country and the prices are usually a lot lower. But I did try and buy some back in May at both Costco and HEB, and I'll add photos here, just to give you an idea of what the prices really were. And I ended up buying the one I've got now, which was bigger than these two, and I think it was $39 and some change. Basically what I'm going to be doing with this video is I am trimming up a lot of the fat off of the brisket. This is a full slab brisket, not a trim brisket, so that gets you the real thick, what I call the heel end, and that is very, very rich in fat, more so than I like to eat. So I really do a intense job of trimming it. I am pretty anal, so I pay a lot of attention to that. My family really doesn't like a lot of the fat in the brisket, so you'll see I cut a lot of it out of here, and then I season it up with the rub mix that was in part 1 of this series, and it goes in the refrigerator for 24 hours. And then tomorrow I will be trying to fire the smoker off around 6 in the morning, and probably the trimmed piece will take 8 to 10 hours, and the heel piece will 12, maybe 14. I don't know. It's going to be close to 100 degrees again tomorrow, so the smokers will run a little hotter than they normally do, so it might finish a little faster. But I hope you guys enjoy it and see what goes into trimming up briskets. Hey there, YouTube fans. Lone Moose here. Alright, it's time to start working on the brisket and trimming it up. This is kind of a matter of personal taste. A lot of people here in Texas like to leave a lot of fat on their brisket. A lot of the barbecue places sell lean and what they call moist, which means it's got more fat. For me and my crew, we like to trim the fat down, so I'm going to start trimming this up. I may not make you watch all of it. It may just be in segments. Don't want to bore you to death, because sometimes, as anal as I can be, this can get to be real tedious. You don't have to worry about the fat going to waste. I've got 5 big old dogs and 1 little dog that absolutely love this stuff, so they'll be getting little bits of it as we go. So here we go. You have to leave a certain amount of fat on brisket. As the brisket smokes and cooks, the fat's going to drain down through the meat, and that's what helps keep it moist. As I had mentioned earlier, prices for brisket have been just absolutely insane lately. I think a lot of that is due to the COVID crisis. In May, when those other brisket prices I showed you, it was just horrendous. There's no way I was paying $129 for a brisket that, I think I paid, $39 for this one. And there'll be a clip of the price tag in the video for you to see. Now, if you got really deep pockets and you prefer getting your meat from Costco and you can afford that $129 or $130 for a brisket, go for it. To me, it doesn't make sense. Brisket is not a top of the line cut of meat. In fact, that's kind of how it came to be what it is today. This was almost a garbage cut of meat back in the old cowboy days. And this was something that they could cook up while they were on the trail, moving the herds, and satisfy their need for meat and for protein. And at the same time, they weren't causing the cattle owners any financial loss, because they weren't really using the prime cuts, the steaks and the roasts and everything. So it was kind of a win-win for everybody. Like I say, I'm just working through this. I will edit it down before I post it, so like I said, you don't have to sit through all of this, because it does get kind of tedious, both for me and for you, but it's got to be. And once I get done with the trimming of it, you can see there's a lot of just huge chunks of fat on this thing. Then I'll do the seasoning. You can refer back to part 1 of this series, where I made up the brisket rub, because that's what I'm going to be using to season up my brisket. And then it'll set in the refrigerator overnight, and tomorrow it will go on the smoker. Now, usually, like I had mentioned, I think in part 1, I would typically try and buy the trimmed briskets, but right now you just can't find them. You got to kind of take what you get. So I do this, and it makes it taste good from my perspective. It's got, like I said, it's got to have a certain amount of fat to it, but you don't have to be crazy with it, because ultimately, with my family, my friends, if it's real fatty, first thing they do is cut most of the fat off and throw it away anyway. So I leave enough on here to flavor it. As you can see, there's some meat that still ends up in this, and the dogs thoroughly enjoy that. I did have to keep the dogs out of here while I'm doing this, because they would be right up here in the heart of the video. As much as I love my dogs, I don't try and force them on other people. They're my kids, my good kids. And sometimes it's just, trial and error till you start getting through here and see how deep to go on it. Because even at the price that I was able to get this, you still don't want to waste any good meat. Now, what I do at the end of this whole process, when it's done, is I'll slice it up, and I may use my meat slicer or may use the knife, just depends on my mood at the time. And then I portion it off in, kind of meal-sized portions, and then vacuum seal it, put it in the freezer. And it keeps really well if you use the vacuum seal bags. They seem to make it keep a lot better than just the plain old Ziploc type freezer bags. So just a helpful hint from the old moose. Can't wait till I actually get up into Alaska and maybe find out about trying to do this with a moose brisket. I can tell you that in my trips up there, I have never seen moose brisket for sale at any barbecue place or any restaurant, so we could be setting a whole new trend up there. Who knows? And by the way, if there is kind of a buzzing sound in the background, it's the air conditioner. At this point in June, it is still hotter than it's not. Supposed to be about 100 today. So unfortunately, in my little building, I can't leave it off for as long as it's going to take to do this editing portion, or the slicing portion. And I'll turn it back on when I do the editing and stuff. But to do this part, I've got to have some degree of cool. Do what makes you happy when you're cooking. You cook for your friends and family. You're not cooking to match what some TV chef does or barbecue competition chef does. You're cooking to eat. you know, if you want to get into that competition stuff, like I said, I've done it before. Good luck with it. It is a lot of work. It's very time consuming. It's fun. You know, you meet a lot of neat people. You learn a lot of good stuff. But ultimately, when you're doing competitions, you're cooking for trying to guess what a judge's palate's going to be. What does he want it to taste like on that day? Because you're going to have different judges at every competition that you would ever go to. And like I said, it can be fun. I enjoyed the two that I did. Probably would not do any more in the future. But again, that's just my personal preference to not do that. You know, I got too many other hobbies and interests, and you know, a game plan of Alaska retirement. And no, I'm not cutting every little bit of fat off here. Like I said, you need some of this fat to be dripping down through the meat as you smoke it. It's going to be a brisket this size, and I'm going to cut it in two pieces. The thinner part, which is the area kind of where I'm working right now, is going to take probably 8 or 9 hours to do, and the thicker end up here, that's probably going to take every bit of 12, if not more. So I will be up early and try and get the smoker going about 6 tomorrow morning. Again, and I'm just speaking from a Texas perspective, but when, you know, meats are available and pricing is about, you know, pre-COVID what normal was for a trim brisket, which is what this end would down here would be when I would slice that off, you're looking at usually about $3.99 a pound. And those will probably run, you know, in the 6 to 8 pound range. And that's really, like I said, what I prefer to do. But you'll get a complete lesson on how to do the whole thing. And if you know how to do a little bit of basic math, it's pretty easy to, you know, downsize what I'm doing here to just doing the small brisket. You know, you won't need near as much rub. Of course, I made up a whole lot of rub because I've got 2 pork butts to do in this series. And now if you look right here, you can see there's a huge piece of fat in there, and I'm gonna try and cut some of that out. And that's where it can sometimes get really messy. But at first I'm going to cut this down, because this is going to be my smaller end. And even at that, if you look in here, you can see there's a fat ring through here, but that's all right. A lot of that will cook out in the process of doing the cooking. Put that out of my way. And then this big honking chunk of fat here, and this fat is really not very enjoyable to eat, and that's why, especially this skin part that I'm cutting off right now, if you leave that in there, it's going to give it a gritty taste. So that you definitely want to work on getting out of there. And I'll see how much of this I can cut out without doing a lot of damage to the brisket itself. And no, I'm not a meat cutter, never been a meat cutter, don't ever want to be a meat cutter, although I do process my own deer meat. And what you're hearing in the background there is a thermometer from a cool brisket itself. No, I'm not a meat cutter, never been a meat cutter, don't ever want to be a meat cutter, although I do process my own deer meat. And what you're hearing in the background there is a thermometer from a cooled to brisket itself. No, I'm not a meat cutter, never been a meat cutter, don't ever want to be a meat cutter, although I do process my own deer meat. And what you're hearing in the background there is a thermometer from a cooled to and use as he likes, as long as I get the kegs back, because the kegs are expensive. Now, okay, you can see there's a big old blood vessel right there too. You know, when we get to Alaska, my buddy Jim's still trying to talk me into maybe doing a nano brewery, small brewery, or being able to get all the appropriate licenses and do it legal, but sell to some of the local bars and restaurants up there, or just brew for him. He doesn't have this celiac affliction. And maybe someday in the future, medical science will get far enough ahead of this that they can get this celiac kind of under control. So that got a lot of that fat out of there, and now you see how it lays down more like that. Got a little bit of fat here on this end to still work off. And a little bit right here. And then I'm going to call this good and go ahead and start with the seasoning process. So when I get into the smoking part of this series, I'll talk a little bit more about it then. But essentially, goal is going to be to smoke this at about 225 to 250 degrees, low and slow. And the reason you do that, brisket is not a tender cut of meat. It takes a long time with the lower heat to begin to break down the connective tissue in here to make it palatable to eat. So that's why barbecuing, and barbecuing does not mean grilling, barbecuing, smoking, low and slow, as they say. Keep the temperature low and smoke it for a long time, and you will have a delicacy that is hard to beat. Alright folks, I'm back, getting ready to do the seasoning. This is my rub recipe, the one that I put out in part 1 that I'm going to be using on here. Like I said, I make a big batch of it whenever I mix it up. This is at least a double dose because I've got 2 more briskets and 2 more big chunks of pork butt that I'll be doing over the next few weeks. You guys will get to see the pork butts that will become the pulled pork. That'll be the back end of this series. So essentially what I do is and I use this scoop because it's a little bit easier, is just shake it out. Go liberal. Yeah, some people may say, oh, you're wasting it. Well, I want it to stick. Remember, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing it my way. I guess that's one of the reasons I'm so in love with Alaska too. So many people up there do everything their way. Okay, very independent minded, spirited group of people. Open this flap up, get all of that in there that you can. And when I take this out of the refrigerator tomorrow, there'll be a fair amount of liquid that has been drawn out of this by the salt and such that's in there. The main thing is just get it in there, leave it there, let it do its thing. Make sure that when you're doing this that you get the ends really good and pack it in there. In my opinion, there's no way you can use too much seasoning. It was kind of funny. Many years ago, when I first started working for the VA, I was living in North Carolina, Winston-Salem area, and my neighbors across the street, Dale and Eugene, told them I was going to be barbecuing and wanted to know if they would come over, after it was all done. Well, the people in North Carolina, when you say barbecue, that means pork or pig, not brisket. They had no clue what brisket was. I since made an addict out of Eugene. In fact, every time I go through that part of the country, I try and take him some just so he'll have it. But it was funny because after that time, whenever I would tell him, hey, I'm going to be smoking a brisket this weekend, Dale would tell me Eugene would be up at between 5:30 6 in the morning looking at the blinds. Where the hell is he? Why hadn't he gone yet? Why hadn't that smoke? I don't see no smoke. It was comical, but yeah, they're great people, some of my best friends, and just goes to show you can convert some people from North Carolina to understand that barbecue does mean more than just pork. So I'm going to cover this stuff up and put it in the fridge and wrap up this episode and get it posted for you. The next part that I'm going to do is going over the Weber Smoky Mountain series, or what I call the Weber Bullet Smoker, and the Minion method for setting up your charcoal and trying to make it. You can't make a charcoal smoker true set it and forget it, but this makes it a lot easier on you, the pitmaster or the barbecue chef, so that you don't have to be running out there to it every 20 or 30 minutes. You'll appreciate this when you get a chance to see this. And if you have one of these, like my buddy Carl does up in the DC area, please pay attention. This really makes a huge difference. So this is Lone Moose. If you like this, please hit the like or subscribe button. That keeps me motivated to make more videos for you guys. I enjoy doing this. I have some ups and downs and stuff. That just goes with being an old guy. But I'll be working on these for the next few days and hopefully get it all posted where you can see it in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Thanks a lot. Hope you guys enjoy it. And smoked meat is as good as it gets.